All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our next session. We have a couple more sessions today, so I want to go ahead and introduce Amy Daley. Amy Daley is our HIPAA Privacy and Security Service Line Lead. So she works with practices and hospitals all across the Commonwealth on helping them secure their IT systems and help mitigate the potential of breach. So Amy's going to walk us through safeguarding and keys to passing an audit if you were to actually have a breach. So Amy, come on up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here in person. Okay, so half the room is missing. I won't take that personally. Apparently HIPAA's not their thing. That's okay. That's fine. It wasn't mine for a long time either, but now it kind of has to be because that's how I get paid. All right, so okay, I got to get, I haven't done an in-person thing. Not that anybody's feeling sorry for me because none of us have, and you all whipped it out, and I'm struggling. Got to make sure I know how to use this thing. So I am Amy Daley, and what Brent was trying to say is that basically I do security risk assessments for healthcare organizations across the state, everything from our small solo provider shops all the way up to multi-network hospital systems, because whether you like it or not, no matter whether you're one or the other, you are subject to the HIPAA laws, both privacy and security. And the security side says, you do have to do those security risk assessments. So basically, to get us started here, let's just do a little walk back in time about HIPAA and where we started and where we've come from and where we are. There's a lot more to HIPAA than just privacy and keeping our patients' information safe and making sure that proper uses and disclosures, right? There's more to it than that. There is the privacy rule, which sets forth the standards for the security and the confidentiality of the patient's protected health information. Then there is the security rule, which, the privacy rule came about in the late 90s. Then we started using computers more, and we started submitting things electronically. And so we had to, what came out was the HIPAA security rule, which set forth the standards to safeguard our electronic patients' health information. So while the privacy rule largely looks at our oral and written communications, it also covers electronic communications. The security rule sets forth the standards for how we safeguard all of our electronic protected health information. Then there is the breach notification rule, which set forth the standards by which we have to notify our patients of any potential breach of their information, and also the reporting standards for notifying HHS, giving us 60 days to report any breach. Then the omnibus rule came out in 2013, and basically it strengthened OCR's ability to levy fines. So what does that mean? That means, we knew we were having to do the HIPAA privacy rule, and then the security rule came around, and yeah, it kind of pertained to us, but we didn't really take it seriously. So OCR said, all right, no, but we have to take this seriously. We're going to start penalizing you if you don't start doing your SRAs, you don't start putting your safeguards in place, and you don't take it seriously. I mean, that's kind of the way I took it. I didn't read that anywhere, but that's basically what it means. They are cracking down on us taking our responsibilities seriously. And then also the enforcement rule kind of just took it a step further and said, there's going to be further provisions for compliance and investigations into these breaches. All right, so that's, I just like to start off with that because HIPAA is more than just what typically we think about privacy, mostly when it comes to HIPAA, but there are 5 rules that fall under HIPAA. So who does HIPAA apply to exactly? All right, covered entities. For the most part, probably most of you in this room are working for a covered entity. Covered entities are your providers, your hospitals, your healthcare organizations, nursing homes. They are also your health plans, most of your health plans like Medicare, Medicaid, HMOs, dental plans, vision plans, and then your healthcare clearinghouses. So those kind of gateways where you're submitting your claims through and back and forth from your billing system. Those are all covered entities. And all covered entities, again, no matter your size, are subject to the HIPAA. Well, I talk mostly about HIPAA security, by the way. So today's presentation is largely, we're talking about how to avoid or hopefully pass an audit. So we're talking about security when it comes to having OCR audit you on a security side. So the HIPAA rules do apply to a covered entity. They also apply to business associates. Again, I mean, all HIPAA rules apply to covered entities, business associates. Business associates are defined as third-party independent contractors that have permission to basically view, transmit, process, maintain your EPHI on your behalf. So usually we see that these are like a billing, coding company, IT, third-party IT company, collections, transcriptionist, cloud storage, I mean, the list goes on and on. But basically, if they are maintaining or handling your EPHI on your behalf in any form or fashion, they are your business associate, and what we're going to get to in a minute is you better have a business associate contract with them. And then there's such a thing, and this was defined more in the omnibus rule as a business associate subcontractor. So this is kind of like your fourth and fifth and sixth and 28th cousins that you don't know, that you never, it's like the extended family. Your business associates can have business associates who can have business associates, and the list can go on and on. And if throughout that chain, if your EPHI is being handled on your behalf or on behalf of your business associate is required to have a business associate subcontractor agreement. And I find quite a bit when I do SRAs that the business, like the IT people that are doing your services for you, they don't even know that they're supposed to have a business associate agreement with a subcontractor, like a cloud storage provider that they're networking with on your behalf. So there's quite a bit to it. And again, business associate subcontractors kind of look a lot like what your business associates would look like. All right, so let me back up and say, the title of the presentation is, proper, like key safeguards to making sure safeguards are in place to help you pass an audit. The truth is, it's not likely that OCR would randomly email you or show up at your door and say, hey, guess what? We're going to do an audit today. I'm going to walk through your hospital and I'm going to find everything you're doing wrong. Yay. Like, they don't do that. They have done that. They did that back in 2017. They actually they announced that they did, like, maybe, I forget the number. I mean, it was 140, 160 random audits nationwide. I don't know that they've done random audits since then, but what's more likely to happen is, you would have a security incident that could have led to a potential breach, and you have to report that. And when it's reported, OCR is going to launch an investigation or an audit. And so really what I want this presentation to do is I want you to be familiarized with what goes into the HIPAA security rule, because it's under that HIPAA security rule that they would launch this audit. There is a lot to the rule. The rule is made up of safeguards. That's what the HIPAA security rule is. It's safeguards. But when I do security risk assessments, what I find largely is that our compliance officers and even our designated security officials are really not that familiar with all the safeguards that need to be documented and in place with regard to the HIPAA security rule. So I'm not intending on making you experts of the HIPAA security rule. I'm intending to blow your mind with the content behind the security rule just by taking you through all of these safeguards. And if HIPAA's not your thing, I hope it blows your mind enough to where you go back to your organization and go straight to your privacy/security/compliance officer, whatever they're called, and say, are we doing this? because this is a lot. And if we aren't, you need to contact Amy and the REC, and we need to get on it. So administrative safeguards are basically, these safeguards manage your security measures and your workforce in relation to the protection of EPHI. All right, so it's basically your policies and procedures in place to document or to make sure that all of your administrative things are in place, like your training program, and that you've got a contingency plan and evaluation. Then we go into physical, and these are literally physical measures to protect your EPHI and your buildings and your equipment. And then technical are hardware and software components that that limit access to your EPHI. All right? Before we go into each one of these safeguards, I can't stress enough how important it is that you have policies and procedures in place. And nobody really likes writing and documenting, but let me tell you, if you are in an investigation with OCR, they're going to ask you for one of two things first. It's either going to be your policies and procedures or your SRA, but they're going to ask you for both of them. So you better have policies and procedures surrounding all these safeguards I'm about to show you. And hopefully they're not dated like 1995 or 2002 even. I hope that they are at least within the last couple of years. And what's required is that you have policies and procedures, not just for the security rule, but you're supposed to have privacy. But most of you do. I find that you all are really good with your privacy policies, because when I ask for them for your security policies, you want to give me your privacy, and then I say, I don't care about your privacy, I need your security, and then you're confused. So you got to have security policies. They're different from privacy. You have to keep them for a minimum of 6 years, and you need to periodically review and update. And we love it when OCR says periodically, because we don't know what that means. So the truth is, you need to be doing this at least every couple of years. So if I'm auditing, if I'm doing an SRA and your policies are dated 2017, I'm going to put that in your report as a vulnerability, because that tells me, I'm sure you've had organizational changes in the past 4 years, and you probably don't have those reflected in your policies. Okay, so let's get with it. Now, I'm going to try to breeze through these, but my colleagues know that that's kind of an oxymoron. Like, I can't breeze through anyway, but anything, I kind of talk too much. And by the way, make sure that you all cue me when I need to cut it off, and I'll wrap it up, because I get going and stop. All right, so the first one, so we're going to break these down into those administrative and the physical and the technical safeguards. I just really don't like standing back here, but do I have to stand back here because of this? What? Oh, because of the camera too? All right, guys online. Okay, I'll stay here. Oh, I really want to walk, but I'll respect our people online. No. All right, so the first one, security management process, all right? So this is the most important one, because you know why? This is the one that says, here's how you need to lay out your whole security management process. That's why it's called that. That's a standard. So within that standard, you have subcomponents. Most of the security rule is written in, here's your standards. Standards are required. And then here are subcomponents underneath it. Some of them are required. Some of them are addressable. Let me just distinguish. It's all required. Just because there's an A next to some of them and they say addressable, that doesn't mean optional. It means you just have a little more leeway in how you implement a solution for that. If it's got the R, you have to do it no matter what, and you have to do it the way that it's written. So just know, there's nothing optional about the HIPAA security rule. All right, so the first one, you got to have a security risk assessment or security risk analysis. Those terms are sometimes interchangeable. Annually is best practice. The security rule does not say you have to do it annually, and we have clients who like to remind us of that, and yes, that is true. But if you spend any time reading resolution agreements like I do, you'll find out that if you're not doing it annually and you've had a breach, OCR is going to hold that against you when it comes to whatever penalties they assess you. So trust me, it's true story. Next one, risk management. So, I mean, our clients that we work with, they've been good about getting their risk analysis done every year. One of the things I find that we're kind of weak on is having a risk management plan. So, you got to have a policy that addresses what's your risk management plan. And basically, you're trying to reduce, you're trying to implement those security measures that will reduce your risk and your vulnerabilities to a minimum necessary. So what are you doing throughout the year to review and to mitigate? Who's on that team? You should have a risk management team. Sanction policy, pretty straightforward. I mean, what are you going to do to your employees if they don't follow or if they break the rules that you set forth? You got to have the sanctions listed. And I see, in privacy, you got to have that too. So it can be the same policy, but you've got to address both the privacy side and the security side. Information system activity review. So, I mean, the purpose of this is to determine if any inappropriate or unauthorized activity has occurred on your network. This is the what to review, how often, and who's responsible. Let me give you a little warning about this security rule. So many of these safeguards start to sound like others. I'm going to get to slides and you'll think, didn't we just cover that, Amy? Didn't you just say that? Yeah, it sounds like it, but actually they each have, there are these minute little details that make them different. So you're going to find one later, it's called audit controls, and you're going to think, well, wasn't that the same as information system activity review? Well, one's an administrative safeguard and one is a technical safeguard, and no, they are not the same, but unless you spend time getting to understand these, then you're not going to have your policies and your procedures written correctly, which is going to show our OCR that you really don't know the security rule as well as you should, especially if you're in that compliance officer role, okay? And your IT department is going to have to be heavily involved in this because it's largely technical across the board. All right, the next one is assigned security responsibility. Can I get somebody's phone because I don't want to, I forgot to bring my phone up here. Yeah, sorry, Brent. You can't text anymore. All right. You have to listen to the presentation. All right, so assigned security responsibility. Okay, I like to talk about this, but it needs to be quick. You've got to have, how many of you all have privacy officers where you work? Nobody has privacy officer? Okay, all right, so I mean, basically, we've figured out that everybody's, we got to have a privacy officer. But what I find when I do security risk assessments is, even in some of our hospitals, smaller hospitals, we don't really, the privacy officer doesn't realize that the security rule is also his or her responsibility. They're very good with the privacy rule, but when I start talking about the security rule is something separate, yes, it is part of the privacy rule, but it is its own rule, I get a scared look on their face because they say that doesn't belong to me. Like that nobody gave me that job. Well, OCR did, and then they said if you don't have a designated security official separate, then your privacy officer by default. If you have a breach and it's related to an EPHI situation, electronic situation, your privacy officer ultimately was responsible for that. So if you are a mid-size, larger size organization, I would encourage you to separate those duties out, and somebody needs to be very familiar with the security rule and handling of EPHI. So identify that the standard says you've got to identify the security official that's responsible, and that security official is ultimately responsible for your policies and procedures for security, just like your privacy officer would be for the privacy. The next one is workforce security. Let's see if I can do this one faster. All right, so the standard is workforce security. The substandards, so workforce security, you're defining roles, job descriptions. So which roles are granted which access, like what access should, like if it's a nurse or if it's a clerical position, if it's a provider, if it's an intern, what access do they have in your EHR? So you're going to define the roles. Authorization and supervision is the process to approve access to your system. And these are, again, think along the lines of all of these little boxes and all of these titles that I'm telling you. You should have a policy written for each of these. You can combine, you could have a policy called workforce security, and then within that policy, you could have subsections A, B, C, D here's how we handle workforce security overall. Here's how we do authorization and or supervision. Here's our workforce clearance procedure, which, by the way, could look like a network access form, like set Susie up like Bobby, if you've seen something like that, like it's a new hire form, and so what access do I give to her? And then you got to have a termination procedure. So what are your procedures for terminating access to EPHI? That's so important. When our employees leave, please do not continue to let them have access to your systems for 3 months. You're asking for it if that's the case, and I'm going to share a scenario with you in a little bit of how that happened. But please make sure you have processes. That's the point of your policies and procedures, is to outline your processes to make sure that you're not leaving gaps for access to your patients' EPHI. All right, so information access management, if I can get there. So this is, again, another administrative. You've got to have policies and procedures that establish how authorizing access to your EPHI. The clearinghouse one, basically, unless you work for a large clearinghouse, this really does not pertain to you. This pertains to clearinghouses that are part of a large organization. Access authorization. So basically, you need to know who has the authority to grant access privileges. So is that somebody in IT? Is that the IT director? Is that the HR director? You need a policy that says this role is responsible for granting access to my systems. And then the access establishment modification, how do you review? So in a policy, you need to describe how do you review and modify a user's right of access. Are you periodically going through and making sure that if Susie's still with us, is she still in this role, and does she still need this amount of access? Yes, these are things that OCR will, isn't this fun stuff? But the thing is, really, part of a security risk assessment is assessing all of this, and your HIPAA security or compliance officer really has to know this stuff inside and out. Security awareness and training. All right, so you got to have a training program, okay? So we train our new hires on everything under the sun, but we have to make sure that our training program includes HIPAA content and not just privacy, but security as well. So your policy should describe what your training program, what it is. So you're going to probably train all new hires. You're going to provide annual training, and then part of the security awareness and training, you've got to send out periodic security reminders. So in your policy, you should address, how often are you going to send out security reminders and what are they going to look like? So that could be a newsletter. That could be an email reminding phishing scams. You're going to try to do that monthly. Seriously, these are the types of things that will save you if you're in the situation of a security incident or a breach. The more you can prove that your workforce has been trained and you've got your policies in place, the more OCR is going to forgive you. Protection from malicious software. So you've got to train your staff on how to protect. Those emails that you get from your IT saying, don't open this, don't open that. We can't send those out enough. Login monitoring. So you've got to have a policy or a procedure in place to train those people, probably in IT or supervisors, on how to monitor login attempts and how to report those discrepancies if there are any. So not your entire workforce is going to fall under that. And then password management, that should be included in your training. Security incident procedures. Basically, you've got to have an incident response plan. You got to be able to train your staff on how to report an incident, who to call, what's the proper chain of command. If it's a cyber attack, if there's been a ransomware attack and someone has found, on their computer, all right, what's the protocol for reporting that? Should they run to IT? Should they call IT? Should they call their what's the process? And then the documentation of that from then on out. So you've got to have a policy, you got to have a plan in place that identifies how you respond and report. It needs to be a systematic way to respond to these incidents, because that helps minimize the effect of or the impact of a breach, should you have one. A security incident is defined as an attempted or successful unauthorized access, use, disclosure, modification, or destruction of information with systems operations, okay? So what are, like, a couple of examples? I'm not going to read all of these, but, somebody steals your passwords. Somebody steals a laptop that's not encrypted. I mean, that's absolutely a reportable offense. Failure to terminate the account of a former employee, and then it's used by an unauthorized user to access EPHI. Anything affecting systems and EPHI is a security incident, all right? I think we're pretty good with what privacy types of incidents are. But these are all things that you need to train your staff on how to report those, and then you need to have a plan in place for responding and reacting and mitigating and investigating internally. All right, and so the next one is the contingency plan. It's a standard. Every organization should have a contingency plan, and as part of your contingency plan, you should have a data backup plan. This part, there's going to be something else regarding data backup a little bit later in technical, but this one basically is saying that you have to create and maintain a retrievable exact copies of your EPHI. So most of you are maybe using a cloud-based storage provider. If your EHR is like ECW, then they're probably using cloud-based for that. But we still have clients who their servers are in-house, and so they do their own backup. So you have to have that plan written down. How often are you backing up? Where are you backing up to? Disaster recovery plan. So this is going to be in that catastrophic event where you have to recover any lost data. So what is the plan? And disaster recovery is part of your contingency plan. Emergency mode operations. So how do you continue operations in emergency situations? That would be in the same building. Disaster recovery would be basically, it's an IT-focused plan designed to restore operations at an alternate site. So think of it that way. Emergency mode operation would be, we've had an emergency power outage, maybe a fire down on the West Wing, but how can we continue to see patients here in this building? Testing and revision procedures, you've got to periodically test and revise this contingency plan. Truthfully, I don't think I've ever had a client that I could say has done that, even though some of them tell me that they have. Applications and data criticality, you just got to prioritize your systems. Which ones are the most important? Which ones do we need to bring up first if we have an outage? Evaluation. This is something else that I really don't ever see being done, but I think it's because there's a lack of understanding. This does not mean security risk assessment. An evaluation is not having the SRA done. An evaluation is something that's done randomly every now and then that says, that's looking at the overall effectiveness of the safeguards that you have in place. Now, I don't have a great way to tell you on how to do an evaluation, but I think even if you used a checklist approach and you did walkthroughs, maybe you did a pen test or a phishing test and you documented your results in that checklist, that would be better than doing nothing. Because I don't know if one of the ones I'm going to share with you today has it, but there was one, a resolution agreement after a breach where they cited them for that, for not doing evaluations. And so this is something I want to familiarize my clients with more over the next year and two to be able to document they actually are doing it. Business associate contracts. Okay, we talked about business associates earlier. Basically, you have to have a written agreement, some kind of a contract in place with all of your business associates if they're handling EPHI on your behalf in any way. This is one of OCR's favorite things to cite in an investigation, and they will find out if you do not have a business associate agreement in place. So the standard says you've got to have the contract, and then basically this, per the omnibus rule, these are the 10 provisions that should be part of all of your business associate agreements post 2013. So if you have business associate agreements still on the file prior to 2013, you're running behind and you need to get that fixed. But I have not had any, in my reviews, I haven't seen any issues with that out in the field. All right, moving to physical. So facility access controls, you've got your contingency operations. Let me see if I can read my notes. Facility access, so basically this says, how am I going to get into the facility if there is an emergency situation? How can I get into the facility? Who has access to that facility? It's maybe it's the backup facility during a disaster recovery. So you have to outline, like, from a security standpoint, who's going to be able to get all that information during that disaster recovery. Facility security plan, I mean, you're safeguarding your facility. You've got locks on your doors, you've got keypads, you've got badges. Whatever you have, you need to outline that in your policy. And can I just say this, like, I still do see generic templates in the case of policies and procedures. And let me tell you, you may have gotten away with that in 2005 and 2006, but today you will not get away with it if your company name is Amy Daley Healthcare Organization, but your policy says XYZ Corporation. That gives it away that there's not a thing in this policy pertaining to Amy Daley Healthcare Organization. OCR is not having it. So please make sure that your policies and procedures are specific to how you run your business and get detailed. Okay, I got that out of the way. You can tell that really bothers me. All right, where was I? All right, access control and validation procedures. Oh gosh, I can't see this. So you're basically validating, so you're going to outline in this policy how you're going to validate a person's access to your facilities, all right? So what are the mechanisms in which, like visitor, do you have a visitor sign-in sheet? Do you have the badges for employees, a facility user access list? That really is what this one comes down to. If you had a facility user access list, and I ask for that every time, that basically is showing who your current employees are, who your current third parties that have access, what access do they have, and if they're no longer working there, are they still on that list? And then maintenance records. Nobody wants to do maintenance records, but let me tell you, if you're changing out your locks, your keys, your pads, your codes, somebody needs to be keeping track of that per OCR. The next one, workstation use and security. Basically, use says how computers are used. So your policy should say, this is how our computers are meant to be used. Usually, organizations will have an employee use form, and the employees will have to sign that says this is what you can and cannot do with computers. And then workstation security, how are workstations physically protected? Best thing to do is to make sure that they are all encrypted, and then you wouldn't have to tie them down with cable locks and such. Device and media controls, disposal, how do you get rid of an old hard drive? Do you document it? Do you have a policy in place for that? Media reuse, are you reusing a laptop for a new employee after this employee quit? Are you wiping the drive? What's your protocol for that? Accountability, are you maintaining a record of movement of hardware in your, and how do you do that? And then data backup and storage. This is data backup, meaning if I'm going to move one piece of equipment from one facility to another, am I backing up any of the data that's on that system right then and there? This doesn't mean what in your contingency plan, the data backup there, like your big time EPHI, EHR system backup. All right, now we're going to get to technical. I really want to get to the last part of this because it's going to be the more entertaining part, and you all wake up. Technical standards. So this is the technical stuff that has to do with the hardware and the software. You have to have unique user identification. That actually is part of the security rule. Every user for every system should have their own user ID. So honestly, if you're still using Nurse 123 and all your nurses are signing into your Windows account, that's really not the best protocol. I can argue that all day. I still have clients who are doing that, but really there's no reason why at this point, if everybody can't have their own user ID, both on Active Directory, both on EHR, but especially your EHR. Everybody, you should have no generic accounts in EHR. Emergency access procedure, break the glass. Best situation I can describe is, you have a local emergency. Think Grey's Anatomy, all right, like catastrophe. And we have to bring in doctors and nurses from the hospital 3 counties over and 2 counties. They're going to come help us. We got to break the glass to let them into our system to see our patients. So what's your procedure for doing that? And have you tested that? And I will say, if you've tested nothing, I would test that out, because you just never know. Especially in light of COVID. Who would have ever thought that's the life we would be living the last 2 years? So if COVID has taught us nothing, it should teach us to expect the unexpected. Make sure that you know how to, I could stand up here and think of some terrible situations. I won't even say it, but, have emergency access so that if you've got to bring in extra personnel, you can give them access, because your patients are going to need all the help they can get in that, and you don't need to be standing around figuring out how to let people get into your systems. Automatic log off, that speaks for itself. You should have something set for just a few minutes, 5-10 minutes. Piss all the doctors off. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but I know that's what it does when you logs them out. But let me tell you, I'm an IT person, and I will go head to head with them all day long. I get their point though, but you can say, it says right here, and I'm not going to take a penalty for it. So, and then encryption, decryption, you need to have a policy in place addressing your encryption, decryption. This is data at rest. The next one is audit controls. You've got to have ways to audit all of your system activity. Your IT people should be in charge of this. So it can be all kinds of different reports. Automated is best, but when I come in, I ask you, what are you doing to review all of the activity? What kind of logs are you reviewing? Show me where you get them. Let me see. But that's exactly what OCR would do. Data integrity, I'm going to glaze over this, because the truth is data integrity is pretty much built into your EHR systems in a multi different ways. You could put in your policy, you could quote some of your EHR language out of your handbook for this one, in my opinion. Because EHRs have come a long way since the security rule was written. Person and entity authentication, passwords, that's what that means, passwords. You got to have passwords. Everybody has to have their own. Password guidelines by NIST, let's just say this real quick. The NIST is finding out that the way we used to handle passwords and require passwords really is not working in our favor. By having our users change their password every 90 days and make it so complicated that they're having to write it down and hide it under their keyboard and have a different one for every system, it's not working in our advantage. It's actually leaving us more susceptible. So NIST says, here's the new guidelines. Just have them increase the password, make it a long password, but you don't have to, you can allow special characters and spaces, and actually NIST is requiring government systems to allow use of emojis as a special character. But outlaw password hints, because guess what my mother's maiden name is? Anybody? Yes. So you could probably just crack okay, come on, that's the truth. And I choose that every time because I know I won't forget it. So that's not working in our favor. So they want to outlaw password hints, remove periodic password change and requirements. That's counterproductive. Let them keep the password longer, make it for a longer period of time, make it more of a passphrase that has 15, 20 characters in it. And then make sure they're not using the same password over and over and over again, and reduce the complexity. So don't require cap, lower, number, special character. That gets on my nerves anyway. So I hope that healthcare follows along eventually with those guidelines. That might make the doctors more happy than they might be able to balance out the automatic log off thing if you don't make them change their password every 90 days, because that makes them mad too. Any doctors in the house and can say amen? No? All right. Transmission security, integrity controls, again, I mean, this is a given, like you're using secure HTTPS, if you're using EHR from home and your IT department is, but you do have to be able to say that you have this in place. Encryption, this encryption one has to do with data in transmission. So, again, you really should, if you're using EHR, there's no doubt that you've got encryption mechanisms in place, but let's say you're using, you need to email sensitive data, so you definitely need to have an email encryption set up. And so if you do have that in case, then you need to have in your policy what you use in the event of emailing or texting. If you allow texting of EPHI, then I hope that your phones and your provider's phones have been encrypted, because that one will get you. All right, so, oh my goodness, I made it all the way through. So can you believe those are the safeguards. That's what we just covered. So every one of these is what the security rule is made up of, and you have to have a policy and or a procedure addressing all of these. And when we do our security risk assessments, that's what we're asking you about. Oh, did y'all have 20 minutes left?
You have 18 minutes.
Woohoo! All right. Okay, so, all right. So one of the things I like to do, probably the thing I love the most about my job, and I don't know why, but I love reading resolution agreements. And resolution agreements are what comes after an investigation that OCR has conducted when a breach has happened. Or even if it's just it's usually after a breach. It has been deemed it is a breach and it's bad. So a resolution agreement, these are found on the hhs.gov website. What it is, it's a settlement agreement signed between HHS, Health and Human Services, which is a department of OCR, Office of Civil Rights. They are the ones who govern the HIPAA rules. And so it's a settlement agreement between HHS and the covered entity that's been investigated. The covered entity or the business associate, whichever one is at fault that has been investigated, will agree to perform certain obligations and make reports to HHS. Usually these resolution agreements don't come until years after the breach was reported. So usually it's 3 to 5 years. So you may hear about a breach in the news, but you won't know what happens or what the penalties are that are associated with that for usually years later. And that frustrates me because I want to know right now. But it's not until that resolution agreement comes out that I get the details, and they usually just leave me wanting more. The other thing is HHS is going to monitor the covered entity's compliance with its obligations. Part of a resolution agreement is a corrective action plan. And so they're going to make sure that you're going to walk on the HIPAA path from now on, and you're going to have to report to them and send information to them to prove that you now take this, you now know your responsibility and you're going to take it seriously. It may include the payment of a resolution amount, and usually it does. I like to read the ones that have the fines, which usually they all have some sort of a fine. And then there can always be a civil money penalty associated as well. So that's in addition to any penalties that are levied by OCR. Okay, so what I want to do, this is where I really want to walk, but I won't. I'll stay right here. I want to tell you a little story. It's actually not a story. It is a true story. But before, okay, let me back up because I don't want you reading that. Here's what happened. Resolution agreement. This is the one I want to start with. City of New Haven Health. So this is the background. This is what happened. This was the breach. City of New Haven Health Department reported a breach of its PHI. 2017 this happened. An employee was terminated. Okay, so this one I really want you to listen to because this is one of the most common things that we don't think could happen, but could happen. An employee was terminated during her probationary period. On July 27th, 2016, the former employee and a union representative entered the City of New Haven Health Department using her work key, red flag. Wasn't she terminated? Why does she still have a work key? Using her work key, the former employee entered her old office and locked herself and the union representative inside. While inside the office, the former employee logged into her old computer, ding, 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 with her username and password, and downloaded information off of her computer onto a USB drive. The former employee removed boxes containing personal items and paper documents. This was witnessed by a student intern who was present at the time. The former employee and the union representative then both exited the building. Okay, so there are the facts. That's what happened. So that's what HHS determined during the investigation. Okay, so the findings or the covered conduct, this is what's called covered conduct in a resolution agreement. This is what OCR says the New Haven Health Department did wrong. First of all, the city impermissibly disclosed the PHI of 498 individuals. So she got PHI of 498 people. So as I go through these, I'm going to flash up on the screen which either privacy or security rule, most of these are going to be security rules, a couple of them are going to be privacy rule, but which safeguard this ties back to, all right? So we can kind of match up. So in this case, it is under the privacy rule, this is uses and disclosures. And we didn't really talk about that today. The city also failed to implement privacy rule and security rule policies and procedures. So this falls under HIPAA rule in general. HIPAA policies and procedures documentation is the header, and I actually had the section number 164.530 is where you get that. This on one of the previous slides. The city failed to conduct an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risk and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic. This right here translates into security risk assessment. I see this on almost every single resolution agreement that I read. The failure to perform a security risk assessment. And if they don't have this, what it will say is that the last assessment was conducted 5 years ago, or they've had an assessment conducted, but they didn't do anything with it. Those are the most common citings in a resolution agreement by OCR. So this one, the safeguard is doing your risk analysis. That's an administrative safeguard. It falls under security management process, conducting your risk analysis. The next one, the city failed to implement procedures for terminating access to EPHI. We just talked about that when the employment of or other arrangement with a workforce member ends. And that includes a business associate. All right, so what safeguard would that one fall under? It's going to be one of those access control ones, right? It's termination procedures, actually, but under workforce security, which is also an administrative safeguard. By the way, if you didn't notice, the administrative safeguards make up over 50% of all safeguards. And what does the administrative safeguards pretty much have to do with? What they cover? Our workforce. So the physical and technical safeguards are not near in size and number as the administrative. All right, and the last one, they failed to assign a unique name or number, so no unique user ID. So apparently she was using a generic user login. And so that safeguard is access control, which is a technical safeguard for unique user ID. All right, do I have time to do one more of these? Don't you all find these interesting? Can you believe that? Well, wait until you hear this one. This one sounds like something out of your middle schoolers, like sci-fi, like a sci-fi book that they read. It doesn't even sound real. Is this the one I want to do? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so before I'm going to leave this one on, I'm going to tell you this story. This one's shorter. All right, on June 26th, oh, by the way, I didn't tell you about this one, did I? I didn't tell you what happened here. They were assessed a $202,000 fine, the City of New Haven, and a corrective action plan for 3 years. So they have to report to OCR for continuously for 3 years until OCR determines that they've got everything in place that they need. But yes, $202,000 for that little incident. All right, so the next one, June 26, 2016. A journalist from www.databreaches.net notified Athens Orthopedic Clinic in Georgia that, quote, a database of patient records end quote, suspected to belong to Athens Orthopedic Clinic was posted online for sale. So did you get that? A journalist from databreaches.net notified this clinic that there is a database of patient records online that's suspected to belong to that clinic, and it's for sale. So 2 days later, a hacker group known as the Dark Overlord. That's the part where I was, like that weird book that my kids don't read, but your kids are probably reading a book that has something to do with that. The Dark Overlord contacted the clinic, ALC, by email and demanded money in return for a complete copy of the database that it stole without sale or further disclosure. So give us money, we'll give you your database back. That was 2 days after the journalist notified the company. Don't you find it funny that a journalist figured this out, and then this just leaves me wanting more. I want to ask more questions. All right, the Dark Overlord had obtained a vendor's credentials. What's that mean, vendor? If it's your vendor, it's your business associate, your third party. They got his credentials, or hers. So they obtained this third party's credentials to the clinic's systems and used those credentials to gain access. 1 month earlier, 1 month prior to that journalist finding it. Before it was discovered. ALC, the clinic, terminated the compromised credentials the day after the journalist notified them, but the Dark Overlord continued intrusion, was not effectively blocked until July, so a month after. So they continue, even though they terminated the credentials, they still had access to the systems and they were still downloading. All right, 208,557 individuals were affected by this breach. Clinical information, demographic information, the whole 9 yards. So what did OCR say we did wrong? Well, there's quite a few things. Requirement to prevent unauthorized access to EPHI of 208,000. Again, this is this is impermissible uses and disclosures, but it also falls under the security rule for authorization and supervision because we did not prevent unauthorized access and we did not have proper credentials set up. We didn't terminate really. So, We've got authorization and supervision, the requirement to maintain copies of HIPAA policies and procedures. So this again comes down to you've got to have that. You have to have policies and procedures in place. So when OCR did the investigation, they found that they do not have policies and procedures addressing all these safeguards. They're going to ding you for that every time. They love their policies and procedures. So they ask for them, you don't have them, there's a red mark on your audit immediately. The third one is the requirement, the requirement to implement sufficient hardware, software, and procedural mechanisms that record and examine activity in information systems that contain or use EPHI. It's a lot of words, but really the safeguard here is audit controls. They weren't auditing. They could also put in their information system activity review. So they could ding them on the administrative and the technical side. But they cited 164.312B, that's technical. The requirement to enter into a business associate agreement, all right? We didn't have business associate agreement with that vendor. So we weren't expecting our vendor to safeguard our information, apparently, because we didn't have a business associate agreement. So written contract, business associate agreement, right there, that safeguard, ding, F. That's not good. You got to have it. Requirement to provide its entire workforce with HIPAA training. Remember, that's an administrative safeguard. You have to have a HIPAA security awareness training program. It's got to be documented. You better show proof of what you're training them on, how often you're training. You need records where they're signing off on their training, perhaps agendas. Requirement to conduct an accurate and thorough assessment. There it is again. They get almost every resolution agreement that I read, they will get the covered entity or the business associate for not conducting an SRA. It shows up in all of them. So that one is your risk analysis. It's an administrative safeguard. And the last one is a requirement to implement security measures if sufficient to reduce risk and vulnerabilities. That's your security management process, risk management. And that's one thing where I said we don't see, a risk management strategy or a team or something put in place when we're conducting these SRAs. We've gotten good at knowing what an SRA is. We've gotten good at making sure that maybe we're doing that. Our clients have anyway. But then we've got to take it to the next step. We've got to have that security risk management process in place so that risk analysis doesn't just sit on a shelf and nothing gets done with it throughout the year. What comes back in that report needs to be addressed and needs to be mitigated and needs to be an ongoing process. It doesn't end. Security risk analysis doesn't end. I'm sorry. I know you wish it did. Sometimes I do too, but it doesn't. All right. I'm not going to go through this one because I don't have enough time, but it's in your slides. And then the thing I want to tell you about, and Brent, well, look, he already did it. When it comes to passing an audit too, again, like random audits are rarely, they're unheard of, just to be honest. But if you really want to know the types of questions that OCR is going to ask and the types of documentation that they're going to look for and what they expect you to have in place, you can go to this audit protocol. If you have slides, you'll see the link. I don't know if you have electronic copy or paper copy, but you go to hhs.gov, search audit protocol, and scroll down, Brent. Actually, hit Control F. And is there a number in there, like 164.3? Okay, yeah. So I know it's kind of wonky on the screen, but like for instance, this is, where'd you go? Data backup plan. There should be the data. I was going to use it as an example, but it'll tell you this left column it's the security rule, the CFR number, which safeguard it is, so it's the contingency plan, what the rule specifically says has to be in place, which is sometimes like deciphering Italian. Can anybody read it? Like, to me, sometimes it's hard to understand. But then that last column lays it out for you. Like, these are the things that you need. So I know that a lot of you will never spend time looking at this, but if you're in that role of compliance and you are responsible for doing the security risk assessment, you are IT, if you're the IT director, if you're the compliance director, or if you're their best friend, share this with them, because this can help really understand what's needed in the security rule and how to, basically, if you're in that position of working with OCR during an investigation, you can already be a step ahead of them and say, you want my contingency plan? I got it. It's right here. What else? You've got it in place, all right? So hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming. At the REC, we would love to help you conduct your security risk analysis each year if you need help with that. We also have other, we can do vulnerability scanning, we can do on-site or virtual SRAs, and we also can provide vulnerability remediation services, which used to be known as our project management, and we can do education and training series with your workforce as well too. So I'm sure I'm out of time. I usually am. Oh, I have 1 minute to spare. That's never happened. Any questions? If you want to just find me later, feel free. Because you probably don't have any, do you? Do you have any questions? No? Oh, the second example? Well, I think I had it at the top, did I? Let's go back. Yeah, 1.5 million. Thanks, Mary, because that was significant. Yeah. Well, they just had a lot of issues. And the story is, the moral of the story is, the more deficient you are, the more, the more of a gap there is between your organization and the security rule, the harder they're going to come down on you. But if you can prove that you've got safeguards in place and you're training your workforce and you're doing all the things, you can do all the things and have all the safeguards in place and still have a breach. But the difference will show up in what OCR ends up doing with your organization through a resolution agreement. Are they going to take it easy on you, or are they going to make an example out of you? So these are some where they've made an example out of. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Amy. Always do so well presenting. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break and come right back, and then we'll have our promoting interoperability for hospitals, and then talk about telehealth, and then that'll be the final for the day. So 10-minute break, real quick, for anybody that needs to run to the restroom. And we're switching out for our event.